The royal hall of the Zatherian Empire was silent. It was not the peaceful kind of silence. It was the heavy kind, the kind that presses on the chest and makes breathing feel slow. Tall black pillars rose like frozen shadows toward a ceiling filled with cold blue light. Guards stood in perfect lines, their silver armor shining under the glow. At the center of the hall, a single human knelt on the dark floor. His hands were bound behind his back, but his back was straight. He did not bow his head in fear. He simply looked at the ground in front of him, calm and still. On the high throne ahead of him sat the alien princess. Princess Elira of Zathera. Her presence alone was enough to make entire armies surrender. Her species did not conquer with bombs or ships alone. They conquered with the mind, and Elira was the strongest mind among them. Her eyes glowed faintly violet, like distant stars ready to burn. Every creature in the hall knew the rule. If she looks into your eyes, she owns your thoughts. No one survives her gaze unchanged. The human knew this too. He had been brought from the prison ships only an hour ago. The last known survivor of Earth's defense fleet. A broken world, a defeated species. That was what the Empire believed. But this human did something unexpected. He refused to look at her. The guards had forced him to his knees. They expected him to cry, to beg, to tremble. Instead, he simply kept his eyes lowered. Princess Elira leaned forward slightly. Her voice was calm, smooth, almost gentle. "Human," she said, "look at me." He did not move. The hall grew even quieter. One of the generals stepped forward angrily, but the princess raised a single finger, stopping him. She was curious now. She stood from her throne and walked down the long steps slowly. Each step echoed across the hall like a countdown. She stopped only a few steps away from him. Still, he did not raise his eyes. Her voice came again, softer this time. "Why do you look away?" The human finally spoke. His voice was steady, not loud, not weak. "Because you're dangerous," he said. A ripple moved through the court. Some gasped, others growled. No one spoke to the princess like that and lived. But she did not strike him down. Instead, she studied him carefully. Dangerous. That was the word he chose. Not beautiful, not powerful, not terrifying. Dangerous. "You are already a prisoner," she said calmly. "I could end your life with a thought. So what danger do you see?" He swallowed once, but his posture remained firm. "You don't kill with weapons," he replied. "You kill by entering the mind. And I won't give you that." The princess felt something strange. It was not anger. It was not pride. It was something rare. Resistance. She reached out with her mind, just slightly, testing the edges of his thoughts without full eye contact. There was a wall there. Not a perfect wall, but strong. Disciplined. Built over years. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "How do you know our power?" she asked. He stayed silent for a moment. Then he answered. "Humans study their enemies." And we learned quickly. The generals shifted uncomfortably. Earth had fallen 20 years ago. Its cities burned, its skies taken by imperial fleets. The Empire believed humanity had been crushed completely. But this human did not speak like a broken species. He spoke like someone who still believed in something. Princess Elira moved closer, close enough that he could feel the heat of her presence. "If you refuse to look at me," she said quietly, "you show fear." For the first time, he allowed a small smile. "Not fear," he said. "Control." The hall seemed to tighten around them. The princess felt a small pulse in her chest. He was right about one thing. She was dangerous. Her power worked through connection, through vision, through focus. Without eye contact, she could not fully enter him. And he knew it. She bent down slightly, trying to catch even the smallest glimpse of his eyes. But he turned his head just enough to avoid her gaze. It was a small movement, but it was deliberate. "You think you can resist me forever?" she asked softly. "No," he replied. "I only need to resist long enough." "For what?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. Then he said something that made even the guards freeze. "For you to start asking questions." The princess straightened slowly. There was no fear in his voice. No shaking in his body, just patience. For the first time in many years, Princess Elira felt uncertainty. Not about her power, but about this human. She turned back toward her throne, her mind racing quietly. "Take him to the lower chambers," she ordered calmly. "He lives?" The generals looked shocked. "But your highness." "He lives," she repeated. As the guards lifted the human to his feet and led him away, he kept his eyes lowered. Yet something had already changed. The most powerful being in the empire had just been denied, and she had not forced her will. As the great doors of the hall closed behind him, Princess Elira whispered to herself, "You are not afraid of me. You are afraid of what I might see." And for the first time in her life, she wondered what a human mind truly contained. If you enjoy intense sci-fi stories like this, gently consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss what happens next. The lower chambers of the palace were colder than the royal hall above. The air was thin and heavy, filled with a faint metallic smell that never left. Soft blue lights ran along the walls like veins, glowing quietly in the darkness. The human sat alone inside a transparent energy cell, his hands now free, but the field around him humming with silent power. He still had not lifted his eyes fully since leaving the throne room. Above him, behind layers of black stone and shining metal, Princess Elira stood inside her private chamber. She had dismissed her generals. She had refused council discussion. She had locked the doors. Yet her mind was not quiet. For years she had broken minds without effort. It was not cruelty in her eyes. It was duty. The Zatherian Empire believed that war was unnecessary if resistance could be erased before it began. Eye contact was not simply a tradition. It was a weapon. When Princess Elira locked eyes with another being, she did not just see them. She entered them. Memories opened like doors. Fear became visible. Lies became fragile. And within seconds, she could twist loyalty, crush rebellion, or plant obedience like a seed. Entire planets had surrendered after one meeting with her. She had made admirals kneel, kings confess, and warriors forget their own names. She was not called the Mindbreaker as an insult. It was a title of respect. But the human had done something no one else had ever done. He denied her access, not by force, not by shield technology, not by drugs or machines, but by discipline. She replayed the moment in her thoughts again and again. His calm voice, his steady breathing, his choice of words. Dangerous. He had not said she was evil. He had not said she was cruel. He understood exactly what she was, and that unsettled her more than fear ever could. Below in the chamber, the human finally allowed himself to lean back against the wall. His eyes closed now, but not in rest. He was thinking, remembering. Training replayed inside his mind like an old recording. 20 years earlier, Earth had known it would lose. The alien fleets were too advanced, too organized, too fast. Cities fell within weeks. Governments collapsed within days. But humanity had one advantage. They learned quickly, captured data, broken signals, intercepted transmissions. And one terrifying truth became clear. The princess did not conquer with ships alone. She conquered with eye contact. Scientists studied survivors of early encounters, those who had spoken directly with her, but somehow escaped death. Their memories were incomplete, their personalities altered, but one pattern appeared. Those who avoided her eyes lasted longer. Those who refused connection kept their thoughts intact. It was a small weakness. But humans build entire strategies on small weaknesses. Secret programs began in underground facilities. Children were trained in focus, in emotional control, in pain resistance. They practiced staring at nothing for hours. They learned to control breathing under pressure. They were taught to let fear exist without reacting to it. Most failed. Some broke mentally, but a few succeeded. The human sitting in the cell was one of the few. He had been 10 years old when the training began. He had watched cities burn on broken screens. He had listened to recordings of alien voices declaring Earth property of the Empire. And he had made one silent promise. if he ever stood before the princess. She would not enter his mind easily. Back in her chamber, Elira stepped toward the tall window overlooking the dark sky of her homeworld. Stars glittered in the distance like silent witnesses. She extended her senses carefully, not fully, just a gentle reach toward the lower chambers. She brushed the edge of his thoughts again, and again she felt resistance. It was not a wall of hatred. It was not chaos. It was structure, layers of discipline wrapped around something deeper, something emotional, something intense. She could sense it waiting beneath the surface like a storm under calm water. Curiosity began replacing irritation. Why train so hard to resist? Why survive so long, if defeat was already certain? A chime interrupted her thoughts. General Kaler entered without waiting for permission. His armor gleamed dark red under the chamber lights. "Your Highness," he said firmly, "the council demands explanation. The human should have been executed immediately." She did not turn to face him. "He interests me," she replied calmly. "He is dangerous," the general insisted. "Yes," she said softly, "he is." Kaler stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Dangerous species are removed, not studied." She finally turned to look at him. "And what if we have misunderstood this species?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. The princess had never questioned imperial doctrine before. Her loyalty had always been absolute. But now there was doubt in her tone, and doubt spreads faster than rebellion. In a lower chamber, the human opened his eyes slowly. He felt it again, her presence brushing against his mind. Testing, measuring. He focused on breathing, slow and steady. Inhale, exhale. He pictured empty space inside his thoughts. Darkness, silence. He knew she was stronger than him. He knew if she truly forced connection, he might fail. But he also knew something she did not. Human minds were not simple structures. They were layered with emotion, contradiction, memory, love, anger, hope, and loss all mixed together. If she ever entered fully, she would not just see him. She would feel humanity, and that could change everything. High above, Princess Elira made a decision that would quietly shake the empire. "Prepare a private meeting," she ordered. "No guards inside. No council oversight." General Kaler stiffened. "That is unwise." "That is an order," she replied. As he left, tension followed him out of the chamber. She looked once more toward the direction of the lower levels. For the first time in her life, she was not preparing to break a mind. She was preparing to test her own. And somewhere deep within the palace, the human waited, knowing the next time she asked him to look up, the real battle would begin. The announcement spread through the palace like a quiet shockwave. The human would not be executed. Not yet. Princess Elira had ordered a private meeting. No generals, no council observers, no mental amplifiers, just her and the prisoner. That decision alone was enough to make the empire uneasy. Curiosity was not a trait the royal bloodline was known for. Power did not question. Power commanded. And yet the princess was choosing to question. In the lower chambers, the energy field around the human dissolved with a soft hum. Two guards stepped forward but did not touch him. He rose slowly on his own. His movements calm, controlled. He already understood something important. If she truly wanted him dead, he would already be gone. This was something else. This was interest, and interest was far more dangerous than anger. They led him through long silver corridors that curved like veins inside the palace walls. Alien symbols glowed faintly along the surfaces, symbols of conquest, unity, obedience. He studied them without lifting his eyes too high. Training never relaxed completely, even when walking, even when breathing. Control was constant. Above, in a private circular chamber surrounded by dark glass, Princess Elira waited alone. No throne stood in the center. Only two simple chairs facing each other. A rare choice. Equality in position, not dominance. She had removed her ceremonial crown. Her long silver hair fell freely down her back. her glowing eyes softer than they had been in the hall. But the power behind them remained unchanged. When the door slid open and the humans stepped inside, the air shifted. There were no guards in the room, no witnesses, just silence. She gestured toward the empty chair. "Sit," she said calmly. He obeyed without hesitation, still keeping his gaze slightly lowered, still careful. She studied him openly now. "You resist me," she began. "Yes," he answered. "You know what I can do." "Yes. And yet you do not beg for mercy." "There is no mercy in mental control," he replied simply. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "That is a human judgment. It is a human experience," he corrected quietly. The tension between them was no longer loud like in the throne room. It was sharper now, more focused. She leaned back slightly in her chair. "You interest me," she admitted. "That is dangerous for both of us," he said. "Explain," she demanded softly. He took a slow breath. "Your empire wins by breaking minds before wars begin," he said. "You remove the need for bloodshed." "Yes," she replied. "That is efficiency, not cruelty. But when you enter a mind," he continued, "you do not just see strategy. You see pain, memory, loss. You change people at their core. That is the point," she said calmly. "And what happens when you see something you cannot control?" he asked. The question hung between them like a blade. She did not answer immediately, because no one had ever asked her that before. Across the empire, species had collapsed under her gaze within seconds. She had never failed, but this human was not presenting strength through weapons. He was presenting uncertainty, and uncertainty was new. Humans were defeated, she reminded him. "Yes," he agreed. "Militarily." She noticed the way he chose that word carefully. "Militarily, not completely." "You believe your species still has power?" she asked. He allowed himself to lift his head slightly higher, not enough to meet her eyes fully, but enough that his voice carried more weight. "Humans are weak alone," he said, "but dangerous together." She felt a faint pulse again in her chest, that same strange feeling from the throne room. It was not fear, it was awareness. She decided to test him, just slightly. She leaned forward and allowed her power to brush against his mind more firmly than before. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. A faint violet glow flickered in her eyes. He felt it instantly. Pressure, heat behind the forehead, a pull toward connection. His breathing slowed intentionally. Inhale, exhale. He imagined walls, dark walls, strong walls. But behind those walls were memories waiting like fire. For a brief second, she saw something, a flash of orange sky, buildings collapsing, a child standing in smoke, hands shaking but eyes steady. Then the connection snapped. She leaned back quickly, not forced away, but surprised. "You almost entered," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "Why stop me?" she asked. "Because if you go deeper," he said calmly, "you might not like what you feel." Her expression hardened slightly. "I do not fear emotion." "You should," he answered. Outside the chamber, hidden behind layered security walls, General Kaler stood with 2 council members. They were not supposed to monitor the meeting, but trust had limits. On a silent projection screen, they watched biometric readings. The princess's neural energy had spiked for a brief moment, higher than normal engagement levels. "She is pushing too far," one council member muttered. "The human is influencing her," Kaler said darkly. Inside the chamber, silence returned, but it was not empty silence anymore. It was charged. Princess Elira stood slowly from her chair. She walked in a slow circle around him, studying him from different angles. "You are not afraid of death," she observed. "No," he said. "You are not trying to escape." "No." "Then what are you trying to do?" she asked softly. For the first time since entering the room, he raised his eyes just slightly more than before, not fully meeting hers, but close enough that the air between them felt electric. "I'm trying to make you curious," he said. The word hit her harder than any insult could have, because it was true. She was curious, dangerously curious. And in an empire built on certainty and control, Curiosity was the first crack in the foundation. Outside, the council members exchanged uneasy glances. Inside, the princess stopped walking and faced him again. "You are playing a dangerous game," she warned. He nodded slightly. "So are you." And in that quiet chamber, with no witnesses to their expressions, the most powerful psychic in the galaxy realized something deeply unsettling. She was no longer studying a prisoner. She was engaging with an equal mind. And the longer this continued, the more dangerous that equality would become. Princess Elira did not sleep that cycle. Zetherians did not require sleep in the same way humans did, but they entered a deep mental stillness to restore clarity. She avoided it. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of orange sky and falling buildings. She felt echoes of something she could not fully touch. The humans' memories were not weak. They were restrained, and restraint was far more powerful than chaos. By the next cycle, rumors had already begun spreading through the palace. The princess had met the human alone. The human was still alive. The council was uneasy. General Kaler had doubled internal security without her approval. Something was shifting inside the empire, and everyone could feel it. The human was returned to the private chamber again. No chains, no energy field, just the quiet circular room. When he entered this time, Princess Elira was already standing near the center, not seated. She looked calmer, but there was intensity behind her eyes. "You said I might not like what I feel," she began without greeting. "Yes," he replied. "I do not lose control," she said firmly. "You don't lose control," he agreed. "You absorb control." Her gaze sharpened. "Explain." He stepped closer, careful, measured. "Your power works through connection," he said. "When you look into someone's eyes, you enter their thoughts." "Yes." "You shape them." "Yes." "But connection is not one way," he continued quietly. "For a moment, even if small, you feel them too." She did not respond. Because that part was true. It was brief, a flicker. But every time she entered a mind, she experienced a shadow of it. She had trained herself to filter it out, to ignore it, to focus only on control. "Most species think in straight lines," he said. "Fear, survival, loyalty. Simple layers." "And humans?" she asked. He hesitated just slightly. "Humans are layered," he said. "Contradictory. We feel love and anger at the same time. We grieve and hope together. We break, but we keep moving." Her eyes narrowed. "That sounds like weakness." "It looks like weakness," he corrected. "But it is not." He stopped walking and stood directly in front of her now, still not fully meeting her gaze. "If you enter a human mind deeply," he said slowly, "you won't just see thoughts. You'll feel loss. You'll feel hunger. You'll feel a mother holding her child while the sky burns. You'll feel soldiers who know they will lose but fight anyway." His voice remained steady, but something heavy moved beneath it. "You'll feel millions of minds connected by shared pain, and you won't be able to separate them easily." For the first time, Princess Elira felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, but hesitation. "Your resistance is not a wall," she said quietly. "It is a warning." "Yes," he answered. Outside the chamber, council members argued in a secure hall. "She grows unstable," one said sharply. "The human has not attacked." Another countered. "He does not need to," General Kaler replied. "Influence is slower than weapons." Inside, the tension between them thickened. Princess Elira stepped even closer now, close enough that only a small shift would create full eye contact. "You believe your emotions are stronger than my mind," she said softly. "No," he replied. "I believe they are heavier." She raised her chin slightly. "You underestimate me." "Maybe," he said, "or maybe your empire underestimates feeling." Silence fell again. Then she made a decision, a dangerous one. "Look at me," she ordered. The words were calm, but firm. This time, it was not curiosity. It was challenge. He inhaled slowly. His training screamed caution. His mind prepared barriers. But he also knew something else. Avoiding her forever would not change anything. Sometimes resistance needed proof. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his eyes. Their gazes met. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then everything did. A surge of violet light flashed in the chamber. She entered, not gently, not lightly, fully, and instantly she felt it. Not a simple memory, not a single trauma, but waves, cities burning across continents, children hiding in underground shelters, fathers saying goodbye through cracked screens, scientists working through fear, people holding hands while ships exploded in orbit, and beneath all of it, defiance, not loud, not screaming, but steady, unbroken. She felt grief so deep it pressed against her own consciousness. She felt love so fierce it hurt. She felt billions of separate lives connected by shared survival. It was not one mind. It was a species. For a fraction of a moment, she struggled to hold structure. Her breathing shifted. Her focus blurred. The human did not attack. He did not push back. He simply allowed her to feel, and that was worse. She pulled away suddenly, breaking eye contact. The chamber lights flickered. She stepped back, not in defeat, but in shock. Her heart was racing, a physical reaction she had not experienced in years. "You see," he said quietly. She looked at him again, but not directly into his eyes this time. "You are not simple," she admitted softly. "No," he said. "You are not conquerable in the way others are," she continued. "Not by breaking one mind." He nodded slightly. "You would have to break all of us." Outside, alarms began flashing through internal systems. Neural readings from the chamber had spiked dangerously high. Council members stared at the data in disbelief. The princess lost neural dominance for 2.3 seconds. One whispered. "That is impossible," another replied. Inside the chamber, Princess Elira felt something she had never allowed before. Empathy. It was small, uncomfortable, but real. She looked at the human again, not as a prisoner, not as a subject, but as something else. "Humans are dangerous," she said slowly. "Yes," he replied. "Not because of weapons," she continued. He waited. "Because you make others feel." And in that moment, she understood the true secret of human eyes. They were not shields. They were mirrors. And when she looked into them, she did not just see humanity. She felt it. The Empire did not panic loudly. It tightened quietly. Across the palace, security protocols shifted without public announcement. Internal networks restricted access. Council members stopped speaking freely in open halls. And General Kaler moved like a shadow through command centers, issuing silent orders. The data from the private chamber had spread among the highest ranks. For 2.3 seconds, the princess had lost full neural dominance. Not to a fleet, not to a weapon, but to a single human mind. That was not weakness. That was contamination. Inside her chamber, Princess Elira stood alone again, staring at her reflection in the dark glass wall. She replayed the connection over and over. The grief, the unity, the defiance. It had not broken her, but had changed her. And change inside a ruling bloodline was the most dangerous thing of all. A sharp chime interrupted her thoughts. The council demanded immediate assembly. She knew what this meant. This was no longer curiosity. This was judgment. In the lower levels, the human sat calmly once more, but this time the guards did not keep distance. They stood closer, weapons active, eyes watchful. He could feel the shift in atmosphere. Something had moved beyond private conversation. He had expected this moment. Empires do not tolerate uncertainty, and he had planted it deliberately. The council chamber was vast and circular, lined with towering alien figures seated in elevated positions. Princess Elira entered without hesitation, but she did not sit immediately. General Kaler stood at the center, armored and rigid. "The council has reviewed the neural data," he began. "There is concern. There is always concern," she replied calmly. "This is different," he said. "You engaged the human at full depth. You experienced emotional saturation. You withdrew voluntarily. Silence fell across the chamber. All eyes watched her carefully. Yes, she answered simply. Murmurs spread through the room. One elder council member leaned forward. Your Highness, the human species has already been neutralized militarily. There is no strategic advantage in preserving this prisoner. There may be, she said quietly. Kaler's eyes hardened. With respect, curiosity is not strategy. Understanding is, she countered. The elder raised a clawed hand. The Empire conquers because we remove resistance before it grows. And what if resistance grows because we never understand it? She asked. That question alone created tension thick enough to suffocate the chamber. Kaler stepped forward again. The human has already influenced you, he said directly. I am not influenced, she replied sharply. You are questioning doctrine, he pressed. Yes, she said firmly. The word echoed louder than any alarm. Across the Empire, doctrine was sacred. The princess had always embodied certainty. Now she was expressing doubt, and doubt spreads faster than rebellion. The human must be executed publicly, Kaler declared, to restore confidence, to demonstrate that no species can disrupt imperial order. A long silence followed. Princess Elira looked around the chamber slowly. She saw fear, not fear of the human, but fear of instability, and fear often leads to violence. You wish to make him a symbol, she said quietly. He already is, Kaler replied. Her gaze sharpened. And if his death strengthens his message, she asked. He has no message, Kaler insisted. He is one individual. She remembered the feeling of billions layered behind him. You are wrong, she whispered. The elder council member struck the floor with a staff. The decision is made, he announced. The human will be executed at the next solar rise in a public arena. The chamber went still. This was not suggestion. It was decree. Princess Elira did not respond immediately. She felt the weight of two worlds pressing against her mind. Duty and truth. Finally she spoke. I will oversee it personally. Kaler bowed slightly. As it should be, he said. In the lower chamber, the human was informed without ceremony. Execution at first light, a guard said coldly. He nodded once. No argument, no protest. When the guards left, he allowed himself a slow breath. This was always possible. He had known the risk, but risk was part of strategy. Later that cycle, the princess entered his chamber alone once more. This time there were no chairs, no calm discussion, only tension. You knew this would happen, she said quietly. Yes, he answered. You do not resist, she observed. If I resist physically, I confirm their fear, he replied. She studied him carefully. You could try to escape. I would not make it far, he said simply. And even if I did, it would change nothing. Silence filled the room. You could beg, she said softly. He almost smiled. Would that change your counsel's mind? She did not answer. Instead, she stepped closer. You said humans are dangerous together, she reminded him. Yes, and now you stand alone. For now, he replied calmly. She searched his face. You are not afraid of death, she said again. No. Then what are you afraid of? He met her gaze briefly, not fully connecting, but enough to show honesty. I'm afraid that you will choose fear over understanding, he said. The words struck deeper than she expected. You asked me to risk the Empire, she said quietly. I asked you to question it, he corrected. A long silence followed. Outside, preparations for public execution were already underway. Massive crowds were gathering in the central arena. Holographic broadcasts activated across conquered systems. This would be a spectacle, a reminder of dominance, a reinforcement of control. You should let me die, he said suddenly. She looked at him sharply. What? If my death plans out in even one mind among your people, it is enough, he continued calmly. She felt something tighten in her chest again. You speak as if you are already a symbol, she said. I am, he replied. For you. The air between them felt heavier than before. Why me? She asked quietly. Because you felt it, he answered. You cannot unfeel it. Outside, The first light of the solar rise began to glow faintly through palace windows. Time was moving. Choice was approaching. Princess Elira stepped back slowly. "If I stop this," she said softly, "I risk civil fracture. If you do not," he replied, "you risk becoming exactly what you warn others about." Her eyes glowed faintly again, not with power, but with conflict. The Empire was turning, not with ships, not with weapons, but with doubt. And doubt, once awakened, never sleeps easily. The arena of Zathura was designed for spectacle. It was wide enough to hold 100,000 beings. Tier after tier of dark stone seating curved around a central platform of polished metal. Above it, massive holographic projectors floated in silent formation, ready to broadcast every moment across the Empire. Today was not a celebration of victory. It was a demonstration of control. Across conquered systems, screens flickered to life. Citizens of dozens of species watched from distant planets. They had seen executions before, but this one felt different. Whispers had already spread. The human who resisted the princess. The human who survived private meetings. The human who made her hesitate. At the center of the arena stood a tall execution frame. Not brutal, not messy. The Empire did not need blood to prove dominance. Neural disintegration would be clean, instant, invisible, a mind erased without sound. The human was escorted into the arena by 4 guards. His hands were unbound. He walked on his own, head lowered slightly, breathing steady. The crowd watched in strange silence. They expected panic. They expected screaming. Instead, they saw calm. High above in the royal viewing chamber, Princess Elira stood alone. The council sat behind her in shadow. General Kaler to her right, rigid and alert. "All systems are ready," Kaler said quietly. "Upon your signal." She did not respond. Her eyes were fixed on the human below. He could feel her presence, even without looking up. It pressed against him like distant gravity. This was the moment his training had prepared him for. But this was not about resistance anymore. This was about choice. A platform rose slowly beneath his feet, lifting him slightly above the arena floor. The execution device hummed to life behind him, a thin ring of light forming around his head level. A single neural pulse would pass through him and erase everything. No pain, no struggle, just absence. Across the arena, murmurs began. Some spectators leaned forward with interest. Others watched with cold indifference. Princess Elira finally stepped forward in the viewing chamber. Her voice projected clearly across the arena, calm and powerful. "This human stands before you as a representative of a defeated species," she began. "He resisted imperial authority. He challenged doctrine. He tested control." The crowd remained silent. She paused, and in that pause, something shifted. The human slowly lifted his head. Not fully, not yet, but enough to look toward her position in the chamber. Their eyes did not meet, but the distance between them felt thinner than air. Before sentences carried out, she continued, "I will confirm his final state." General Kaler stiffened. "That is unnecessary," he whispered urgently. She ignored him. In the arena below, the human understood what she was about to do. This would not be partial contact. This would not be careful testing. This would be full connection. Public. Irreversible. Princess Elira stepped onto the balcony edge of the chamber. Her eyes glowing brighter now. Violet energy gathering like a quiet storm. "Look at me," she said, her voice carrying across the arena. This time it was not command. It was invitation. The human took one slow breath. Inhale. Exhale. He lifted his eyes fully. Their gazes locked across the distance. And the arena vanished. For her. For him. For a moment, there was no empire. No crowd. No execution device. There was only connection. And this time she did not hold back. She entered completely. And she was unprepared for the scale. It was not one memory. It was not one war. It was centuries of struggle layered upon each other. Ancient battles fought with primitive weapons. world wars that scarred entire continents, families rebuilding cities from ruins again and again, scientists dreaming under fear, artists creating beauty during darkness, children laughing even when the world seemed broken. She felt humanity's worst moments: cruelty, failure, division. But she also felt something else: persistence, a refusal to vanish, a pattern that repeated across generations. Fall, rise, fall, rise again, and beneath all of it, connection, not psychic, not forced, but emotional, shared stories, shared pain, shared hope. She tried to isolate his individual mind, but it did not exist alone. It was linked to billions through memory and culture, through history and sacrifice. The weight of it pressed against her consciousness. Not attacking, not fighting, just existing. Her breathing faltered slightly, a rare sight visible even to the distant crowd through magnified projection. Neural energy readings in the control center spiked violently. "She is exceeding safe limits," an operator shouted. "Break the connection," Kaler ordered. But no one could interrupt royal neural engagement without her consent. Inside the connection, she realized something terrifying. She could not dominate this. There was no single fear to exploit, no central weakness to twist. Humanity was flawed, divided, chaotic, but it was resilient beyond calculation. Control required simplicity, and humans were not simple. She felt his awareness inside the connection. Calm, steady, not pushing, not resisting, simply allowing her to see. And in that allowance was the true danger. He was not trying to defeat her. He was showing her what conquest truly cost. Suddenly, she understood the full meaning of his warning. If she continued down this path, she would have to erase not just one mind, but everything that mind represented. And that would not be control. It would be destruction. Her eyes dimmed slightly as she broke the connection herself. The arena rushed back into reality. The crowd stirred in confusion. The execution device remained active, humming patiently. Princess Elira stood motionless for several seconds. Then she spoke, her voice quieter but carrying more weight than before. "Deactivate the device." The command echoed across the arena. Operators froze. General Kaler stepped forward sharply. "Your Highness, this is a mistake," he said. "No," she replied, her gaze still fixed on the human below. "This is a choice." The execution frame powered down slowly, the ring of light fading into nothing. Gasps spread across the arena. Confusion turned into tension, tension into unrest. Across the empire, viewers watched in disbelief. A public execution had been halted, not by rebellion, not by malfunction, but by royal decision. The human lowered his gaze again, breathing steady. He had survived, but survival was not victory. This was only the beginning, because the moment the princess saved him, she had not only challenged the council, she had challenged the foundation of the empire itself. And empires do not fall quietly. The silence after the execution was louder than any explosion. Across the arena, confusion moved like a rising storm. Some voices shouted in anger. Some whispered in fear. Others remained still, watching carefully. Above them, Princess Elira stood unmoving on the balcony. The human remained on the platform below, alive. That single fact had already divided the empire. In the council chamber behind her, arguments erupted without restraint. "This is betrayal," one elder hissed. "She has been influenced," another said sharply. General Kaler's voice cut through the noise, calm but dangerous. "If weakness spreads, rebellion will follow." Below, in the arena, the human slowly stepped down from the execution platform. No guards touched him. No chains returned. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He understood something critical. Survival was not the end of the battle. It was the beginning of a far greater one. Princess Elira finally raised her hand for silence. Her voice projected across the arena and beyond, carried to every screen in every conquered system. Citizens of the Empire, she began, you have witnessed something unexpected. The murmuring faded gradually. You were told this human was dangerous, she continued. That statement remains true. General Kaler's eyes narrowed. The crowd leaned forward. Humans are dangerous, she said clearly, not because of their fleets, not because of their weapons, but because they endure. A ripple passed through the arena. To conquer them fully, she continued, we would need to erase not only their bodies, but their memory, their connection, their history. She paused deliberately, and in doing so, we would destroy something we do not yet understand. The council chamber doors opened abruptly behind her. General Kaler stepped forward openly now, no longer hiding disagreement. Your Highness, he said loudly, you undermine imperial certainty. Certainty built on ignorance is weakness, she replied without turning. The statement struck like lightning. Across distant systems, alien citizens listened in shock. This was not the voice of a conqueror. It was the voice of someone questioning conquest itself. The human watched her carefully from below. He could see the tension in her posture, the weight of command pressing against her shoulders. You asked the Empire to hesitate, Kaler said sharply. I asked the Empire to evolve, she answered. The word echoed across the arena. Evolve. It was not a word often used in imperial doctrine. The Empire believed it had already reached perfection. General Kaler turned toward the gathered council members. This path invites division, he warned, and division invites war. Princess Elira finally turned to face him fully. War already exists, she said quietly. We simply silence it. The tension became physical. Security forces around the arena shifted position, some waiting for Kaler's signal, others waiting for hers. For a brief moment, the Empire balanced on a blade's edge. The human felt it clearly. This was the true battlefield. Not Earth, not fleets, but ideology. Kaler stepped forward again, lowering his voice, but keeping it audible to the broadcast. You have been altered, he said. You felt their emotion, and now you doubt. Yes, she replied calmly. I felt them. And you still stand? Silence followed that admission. It was not weakness in her tone. It was strength. She had faced the full weight of humanity and had not collapsed. Instead, she had changed. And change frightened those who relied on stability. Humans are the most dangerous species we have encountered, she declared, because they survive loss, because they rebuild after destruction, because they fight even when hope is thin. She looked down toward the human, and because they make others question. Across the Empire, small reactions began to form. On distant planets, conquered species who had once been broken by her gaze now whispered among themselves. If the princess could question doctrine, could they as well? Inside the council chamber, several members began arguing openly with Kaler. Some saw risk, others saw opportunity. Division had already begun. Kaler's voice hardened. If you do not authorize immediate containment, I will. The threat was clear. This was no longer political disagreement. This was the edge of internal fracture. Princess Elira stepped down from the balcony and walked toward the central command console, every movement watched by thousands. She placed her hand upon the control surface. With one command, she could reauthorize the execution, restore certainty, end doubt, or she could do something far more dangerous. She looked once more at the human below. Their eyes met briefly, this time not as ruler and prisoner, but as two minds aware of the consequences. You once asked why I looked away, she said, her voice carrying again across the arena. And you answered that I was dangerous. She paused. You were correct. A hush spread through the crowd. But danger is not always destruction, she continued. Sometimes danger is transformation. Then she issued a command no one expected. Effective immediately, all conquest operations are suspended pending review. Gasps erupted, some cheers from distant systems. Shouts of outrage within the arena. Kaler stepped back as if struck. You cannot, he said sharply. I just did, she replied calmly. Security forces hesitated, unsure of allegiance. The Empire did not collapse in that moment, but it cracked, and cracks spread. The human stepped forward slightly on the arena floor. He did not raise his voice. He did not declare victory. He simply looked up toward her once more. "Will you look at me now?" she asked quietly, not through broadcast, but directly. He held her gaze fully this time, without fear, without defense. "Only if you promise not to conquer anyone again," he answered. A faint, almost human smile touched her expression. "I promise to question before I conquer," she said. It was not a perfect answer, but it was a beginning. Above them, stars shimmered beyond the open ceiling of the arena. Witnesses to an empire at the edge of change.